Hello, welcome back to Meraki Unboxed. My name is Simon Thompson, host of the show, and it's awesome once again to have you with us. Today we are going to be going into a customer story. So we do like to mix it up on the podcast. We sometimes feature our own technology. We sometimes like to talk about our own business and the culture and the people at Meraki, but we also love to bring in customers and partners of our business because that's where things get real. That's where we actually learn how the products get used in the real world and the kind of experiences that people are having with them. And that's why every time I kick off one of these podcasts, I always love to try to welcome you both to the episode you're listening to, but also as a potential participant. That's exactly what's happening today. We've got a customer joining us to talk about their experience with Meraki. And if you'd like to do the same thing, I would love it if you would reach out to me just to say hello, tell us what you think of the show, what you would like to see more of, and perhaps to contribute to your own ideas or maybe even be on the podcast yourself. I am super easy to find online. Just go to twitter.com and look for Meraki Simon. That's my handle on Twitter. And you can message me there and just let me know if you would like to participate in any way. If you are also subscribed, that's awesome because we do drop these episodes about every 2 weeks. And we try to keep that content fresh. A lot of it is time specific, but some of it isn't as well. Some of it lasts really well. And we've got some content that now goes back over 50 episodes in the bag. And so I definitely recommend if you're interested in learning more about Meraki, if you're new here, do go back and explore the archive. Have a look and see some of the episodes we've covered previously. I'm sure you're going to find some good content there. So we're now into some new content. And I want to start off by introducing our guest today, Zac. Hello and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Simon. Thank you very much for having me.
It's awesome to have you with us. Thanks a lot for taking the time out. And Zac, could you just maybe introduce yourself? Tell us what you do, a little bit of your history as well. We'd love to know your own sort of career history that's got you up to this point.
Sure. I've working at Service Corporation International for the last 13 years. My current role is the Director of IT Security. My background is mostly in infrastructure. My career started kind of at the ground up. First job was taking help desk calls for compact computers way back in the day. And then I moved on to desktop, server, networking, database, lots of infrastructure work. Took the role of overseeing infrastructure at SCI before I moved on to the security role, which is where I primarily focus on now is along with network and voice architecture.
So what is your job title now?
Director of Information Technology Security.
I love that you told the story there about starting on the service help desk, and I think you said about compact computers. I remember those as well, and actually that's how I started my IT career. It's a very good way to start cutting your teeth, answering all of those phone calls, I think.
Yeah, it gives you appreciation for those folks.
Definitely does, in many ways. Okay, so could you just introduce the organization? Tell us a little bit more about Service Corporation International. I think we shortened that to SCI, right? And tell us how it's actually built up.
In the enterprise world, we're kind of a unique space to work for. We're the North America's leading provider of funeral, cemetery, and cremation services, along with what we call pre-need or final arrangement planning. We're primarily or exclusively located in North America and Puerto Rico, so nearly all states. We're in 44 states and 8 Canadian provinces. Wow. We also have over 1,900 locations right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you're also like a little bit of a house of brands as well, is that right? So maybe give us a sense of how the business actually operates, because I think SCI is not going to be a name that's familiar to everybody.
Right. We've grown at the beginning organically and then heavily through acquisition. And we have a few brands. Our most well-known brand being Dignity Memorial. We have a few other larger brands like Neptune Society or Advantage. And then in the community, our funeral homes and cemeteries typically keep their same name and just add the branding on. So we like to keep the name that's known in the community on those funeral homes.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. When did SCI first start working with Meraki technology?
I had to go back and look at that, but our first switches and access points we added in 2014. It's been almost 7 years exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. And so how did that first come about? When did you first hear about us, and what were you using before?
Like I mentioned, since we grow through acquisition, we had quite a bit of different solutions out there, and there was some autonomy for our location management to pick things. But we decided we wanted to start providing a solution rather than trying to manage existing solutions or rely on our local people to enforce our security policies and keep things up to date. We started looking at several options where we were already a big Cisco customer. Mm-hmm. So we looked at the traditional solution from Cisco. We looked at things like Aruba, and then Meraki came about. I believe we discovered that through our Cisco rep at the time. Okay. So I believe that was close to that time of the acquisition, maybe within a couple of years.
So the thing started with trials, presumably. Did you kick off with the product trial?
We did. Obviously, got some devices in, started testing, looking at the solution, figuring out how it would fit into what we were doing. And at the time, it was kind of early in this, I guess, cloud managed infrastructure world that's grown a lot today. Mm. It was the solution basically was what we had in our head for what we would need to be able to scale without having to add a lot of staff, change our network architecture, that type of stuff. So we quickly kind of identified that this was the right solution for us, since in addition to that, all the functionality capabilities we required were there.
I can certainly imagine that this whole standardization thing is a challenge, because you presumably inherit all kinds of different IT solutions with your growth strategy. As far as the Meraki technology is concerned, I'm guessing that, like you said, it really ticks the box in terms of just making it easy to centralize that and have a standardized approach across the board. And that's really the main theme of what we're talking about today, I think, is that standardization process. When you reflect back, I mean, what are some of the nightmares that you inherited? What are some of the kind of IT environments that existed beforehand?
I would say most of it, especially when you consider some of the acquisitions are smaller companies, maybe even just one location. We're dealing with a network that may have been implemented without any kind of IT expertise. So, discovering daisy chain switches, multiple access points with different SSIDs, inadequate security configurations on wireless, just everything you can think of. And then, there's a lot of implications there from performance and security that they would start to experience, especially when they took on our applications. Typically, we use a lot more technology than some of these locations did traditionally.
Mm. And yeah, that daisy chain switches, I haven't heard that term for a long time, but I definitely remember that. What kind of a nightmare that can create. And when you start getting loops in the in those, it's game over for a site normally. Yeah,
for sure.
So, and what are some of the sort of you obviously talked about it started with the APs and the switches. So how has it evolved to today then? So what other Meraki and Cisco technologies do you make use of now?
Yeah, so about 6 or maybe 7 years ago, we decided to also standardize our firewalls across the network or in all these field locations. So similar to the APs and the switches, we went through a process to look at our options and decided on Meraki. So that was our biggest deployment to date of Meraki technology. So we purchased MX firewalls for basically the entire network. Wow. And then we've continued to use the MR access points and the switches to deploy. We're also pretty significant, or have a pretty significant deployment of Cisco IPT in several hundred locations, and that's growing quickly. Yes, IP telephony. Yep.
Yep. So many acronyms in this business.
Yeah, there is. Yep. In addition, as far as Cisco technology, we're a big WebEx customer right now, and then it's our primary technology in the data center for routing and switching.
Mm-hmm. So that's a lot to keep on top of. So I can certainly understand your desire to try and keep it as simple as possible. And it's when we get those shocks to our regular workflow that we really, I think, start to see some of the benefits of the decisions we've made as far as IT design, network infrastructure design, and so on. And of course, the obvious example here is the pandemic we've been experiencing, which was such a big shock for so many different businesses and operations. I mean, how did the pandemic affect your work, and how have you and SCI adapted to what we now? I mean, there's this term we keep hearing too many times of the new normal. Talk us through that story.
Sure. So, yeah, as you can imagine, given our business, the pandemic had a very big impact on us. Whether it be the increase in cases and families we were helping, or the lockdowns on funeral services, or even being able to come into our offices to make arrangements. So we were in a good position for remote work based on our existing VPN strategy. So I would like to say it was thoughtful, but maybe a little bit of luck in there too. Like there always is.
That's all right.
Whenever something like this happens. We were also, like I mentioned, at the time we used WebEx. We weren't nearly as big of a customer as we are today. So we saw an increase at peak over 4,000 users on WebEx from about 5 to 600 at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's leveled off a little bit, but we're still just under 3,000 on a monthly basis. And we were able to leverage that to do live streaming of services in some case. We also have, other solutions we use for that. We did use it to make arrangements with families remotely where they couldn't come in or weren't comfortable coming into our facilities. And one of the ways that Meraki helped, especially with the ease of deployment, was given some of these new things like remote arrangements and live streaming, some of the locations weren't equipped to do that well. So we were able to quickly deploy access points, switches to locations that maybe needed to beef up the AP strength a little bit, or the access point strength a little bit in the locations to do the live streaming. In some of the markets that were hit heavily, like New York, for instance, we were able to add equipment very quickly. So they were able to take more phone calls, have more people take phone calls in the locations, because they just couldn't handle the volume with the existing staff.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hallmarks of a really good infrastructure design, is when it's able to react quickly and scale quickly when you need it to. So I can only imagine that must have been like a major headache at the beginning, or concern at least, about how to adapt quickly. And it's very interesting to hear some of the ways that you did that as well. Thinking about the standardization again, I think this is really the interesting topic. Obviously, we talked about Meraki being good for that, but I'd love to just unpack that a little bit more. Maybe you just walk us through some of the ways in which you feel that it's the right solution for standardizing, and why that's so important to you.
Yeah, I think everybody has different needs, and particularly for us, given the decentralized nature of our facilities, we have having 1,900 plus locations. I think everybody agrees that standardization is important, but being able to standardize and support that equipment without having to exponentially scale your IT staff is super important for us. And then being able to support not only the equipment, but our customers or our associates that work for us, so that we can, see what's going on at the location, proactively identify performance issues or other problems they may be having, so that we can quickly respond to them and support them. And then with standardization comes, kind of those single panes that you can look at to get lots of information, whether it be as performance data, but also security alerts and threats that we might be seeing, without having to pull from a bunch of different vendors to give that visibility.
And have you actually experienced a lot of challenges around security? I know that having a standardized firewall arrangement must help with that, because I'm guessing we keep hearing about these ransomware attacks and major problems. Have you experienced any sort of security issues that you've had to sort of work through with the technology?
Yeah, so I think that the technology's really put us in a good place. Obviously, along with other security technology we use to be able to respond to threats and attacks. So with the firewalls, for instance, we're able to proactively address threats that we maybe get threat intelligence on, or if we're seeing some type of attack or attempt to attack us, we're able to address those proactively. So we face a lot of the same threats that you would see at other companies. So it's very important for us to be able to respond and mitigate those, and make sure we protect our customer data and also our business operations, so that we can serve our customers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a perennial. I think it just never really goes away, does it? It just keeps evolving and changing over time. So again, I think of that as a good endorsement for a standardized approach, because obviously you can ensure with just a few clicks that you can protect all your locations if you need to make a security change of some description.
Yeah, that's where the centralized management is just so important, to be able to get those changes rolled out quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so obviously on the networking side, it sounds like we're all fairly well buttoned up at this point in time. What about other technologies you're currently looking at?
From a Meraki standpoint, we have started looking at and evaluating the Insight solution for application, voice over IP, WAN performance monitoring to enhance what we're doing with SD-WAN.
Uh-huh.
Also looking at the security camera solution as a way to locations that have that need a secure approach to remote access to cameras. And then we're looking at various solutions for secure access service edge to complement what we already do, and integrating that with the Meraki firewalls.
And that's really interesting as well, because SASE, well, as you said, a SASE, as we sometimes describe it. I mean, that's still quite a new term for a lot of people. What is it about that's attracted you? I know that we've obviously talked about SD-WAN in the past, and it's really like an evolution of that. What is it about SASE that looks like it might be a good way forward for you?
Yeah, so I've talked a lot about centralized management, so I think SASE helps kind of take that to the next level. The other thing that really interests us with this is one of the strategic approaches we take is platform-based, so establishing these strong relationships with our partners and leveraging those so we can mature our security and infrastructure programs. Mm-hmm. With SASE, just being able to utilize that platform, and as you have increasing needs for whether it's functionality or security, being able to use the same platform and add things in a modular approach to gain those capabilities without a huge amount of work that your teams have to perform.
Mm. Yeah, this is again the simplification piece. It just keeps on coming back. Meraki Insight you mentioned, and I think that's one where maybe not everybody has had a chance to implement that, and it's obviously related to what we were talking about with SD-WAN and SASE. as well. Maybe just describe for us what you've experienced as you start to use that. What does it actually do for you? What problems is it solving?
Sure. One of the big things is the ability with our SD-WAN deployments to monitor both of those circuits, alert on them, see their performance proactively, so that we're not waiting for a location to call us about problems. So and also be prepared if there is a failover. We want to make sure that their backup circuit is reliable. We don't want to find out that the backup circuit's having problems when they need it. And then as the voice over IP deployment grows, we see that there could be a lot of value in the tool to monitor that performance proactively as well.
That's awesome. And also you mentioned the cameras. I think the way those can be used, there's actually quite a lot of ways, and we've explored a lot of those on previous podcast episodes, where we look at not just the ability to view a space, a physical space, but also potentially to provide a source of data as well. Do you have like a security camera system in place right now, and this is now like the next stage of your standardization?
Yeah, so with the security cameras, we primarily have more closed circuit type solutions. So this is kind of a next phase of maturity where there may be some standardization as needed, and the growth of those capabilities, so that we can make sure that the video security needs are met.
Right. So one of the advantages, I think, of these podcast episodes, when we're lucky enough to get a guest to join us, is really that obviously you're able to provide the value of your experience to others. And so I'm sure there'll be some people listening and thinking about a potential journey with Meraki or with any other technology, really, that just going to help them with their organization. And I wonder if you've got any advice you'd like to pass on to listeners who are facing the challenges that you've experienced, so particularly around a very fast-growing business with a lot of sites to manage.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things with having a lot of sites is just you have to make sure that the solution can scale and perform, but also that you can support and manage it on an ongoing basis. So not having an initial deployment that then stays static going forward. That's difficult to maintain, install updates to firmware, that type of stuff. One other thing I really like to look at is the time to value. How quickly can you deploy and get the potential out of a system? Some deployments you see in infrastructure never get there for a variety of reasons. But if you can kind of create that timeline and in your deployment based on how easy it is and capabilities, start getting value out of it as quickly as possible. That's I think super important. And then kind of going back to management, just the ongoing requirements for support. Are you going to have to scale your staff up in a kind of linear fashion? I need another person for every 20 firewalls or whatever that number might be for you. But if there's a solution out there that's easy enough to manage to where that's not as big of a requirement or concern, I think there's a lot of value there. And then in my role, obviously security is at the forefront of all this. So making sure not only is the solution itself secure, but when we're talking about infrastructure technology, looking at what value it can add to security for you. And then the last thing that was actually really important to us when we made our decision is the future-proofing aspect of it. So is what we buy today what we're going to have for the next 10 years? Or is that solution going to grow and change as the technology matures? And I think that was one of the biggest selling points for me with Meraki, is knowing that different capabilities are being added, because it really is that true SaaS or cloud approach to managed infrastructure.
Yeah, and that sort of loops back to the first comment you made around sort of time to value as well. I think it's definitely an aspect that we're very proud of is that even though you might buy a product with maybe not every single feature that you want it to have, the likelihood is that we're developing it and it will come. And of course, the customers get that at no additional cost once we start developing those. In fact, I remember always saying that the feature set that you get with a brand new Meraki product is it has the fewest features it'll ever have when you first get it, because it's always going to be sort of adding more over time as our customers drive that. And that's one of the things we learn is by listening to how the products are being used. It helps us to identify where to take it from there. Zac, thank you so much for sharing all of those details. And I think it's very interesting to hear it being actually relayed by somebody who's using the product in person, because it really reflects what I think we're trying to achieve, which is that sort of simplicity and that ability, therefore, to be able to scale a business and adapt to different shocks to the system, like we've discussed during this episode. So awesome to have you join us, and thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, Simon. It was nice talking with you.
The great thing is that it's very easy to get involved with this podcast, and Zac obviously volunteered to join us and to share his story with SCI. And so I definitely encourage you to do the same thing if you have anything you would like to share with us, and any sort of technology you're thinking about, or any use of our own products. Of course, we love to talk about those, but mostly we want to hear about how they're being used in the real world. That's where things get, I think, really interesting. We've had obviously a good example and a good discussion about that today. All right, time to wrap things up for another episode of Meraki Unboxed. I want to thank you all once again for joining us. It really is great to have such a consistent audience. I can see that in the numbers. So thank you so much for being a subscriber. And do share the podcast as well if you know anybody who would benefit from learning a little bit more about this kind of technology. For us, it's an ongoing journey. We're constantly evolving based on this software applied approach to this technology, and we know we've got a long way to go. It is a journey, and it's awesome to have you along with us on that. Speaking of journeys, we will be back with more on Meraki Unboxed in 2 weeks, so look forward to speaking to you once again then. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and take care. Bye for now.